this program to bring you Courage the Cowardly Dog Show, starring Courage the Cowardly Dog!
There aren't a lot of shows that tug at my heartstrings quite like Courage the Cowardly Dog does. Courage is a show with a kind of rustic, nitty-gritty feel to it that uses that to its advantage when leaning into the horror aspect of the show, which it does a lot. At its core, Courage the Cowardly Dog is a show that parodies and in many ways emulates many different common tropes and stereotypes from horror movies and shows. It's a show that many kids probably remember as being terrifying at certain times. Like, sure, it's still a children's cartoon, but there were certain aspects that really stuck with many of us as young viewers who grew up watching it. We're looking at you, King Ramses.
Return the slab, or suffer my curse.
What's your offer?
However, there were also many aspects of the show that were incredibly sad, and specifically a few episodes that did a really fantastic job at tugging on your heartstrings. That's why today, on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're looking at a few of the all-time saddest episodes of Courage the Cowardly Dog. But first, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I'm on the road to 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I can only reach that goal with your guys' help. So if you aren't subscribed yet, please consider subbing. It's completely free, it helps me out a ton, and it helps increase the chance that you won't miss my future videos. Also, huge shout out to Liquid IV for sponsoring my channel. If you aren't familiar with it, Liquid IV is a little packet that you dump into a water bottle, and not only is it really delicious, but it's fortified with electrolytes and way more hydrating than normal water. One bottle of Liquid IV is equivalent to about 3 bottles of normal water. As someone who really values hydration, I suggest that you check it out. Liquid IV is an amazing product, and I never recommend a product to you guys that I wouldn't use myself. If you want to try some Liquid IV, I've got a special offer for you. Follow the link down in my description box or use the promo code DuskTillShawn9 to receive 15% off of your entire order and free shipping. And again, thank you so much to Liquid IV for sponsoring this video. Okay, so usually with videos like this, I try to save the most sad for last, but this time, I think we're just gonna come out of the gate swinging. We're gonna start out by diving into the Season 4 episode, Last of the Star Makers. The episode starts out with a beautiful green space squid floating around and making stars as he flies by elegantly. Just then, we see a lovely purple space squid float up and the two join each other in a loving embrace. All of a sudden, we see rocks, satellites, and a moon fly by as we pan to see a gigantic space whale attempting to eat the space squids. The purple squid is almost completely swept away, but the green squid sacrifices itself, throwing the purple squid in the opposite direction. We see the purple squid enter the Earth's atmosphere as she seeks refuge from the giant space whale. We cut to the middle of nowhere, where Courage is waking up in the morning to grab the newspaper off of the porch, when all of a sudden the massive space squid crash lands in the barren field outside of the farmhouse. Courage freaks out and he goes to tell Eustace and Muriel.
Shut up!
Eustace, leave Courage alone! My, 'tis a gorgeous day. A lovely giant squid.
Muriel is just ecstatic. She says that this must be a giant squid nest and a giant squid mom sitting on her giant squid eggs. She instructs Courage to make their guest feel right at home. Eustace comes up and immediately complains about the giant squid being on his property. Eustace says that they don't have room for big ugly slugs, but Muriel walks right up and tells him to stop as she makes an attempt to get to know her.
Is this your star? Oh my! You make stars.
The squid shows Muriel how she can make stars and explains that all of the stars in the sky come from her kind.
Are there others like you? Oh no. Well, don't you worry, my dear. We'll take good care of you.
Just then, a convoy of government vehicles pulls up saying that they're with the secret department of space squids. The guy in charge hands Eustace a bag with $1 million in it for calling them, and they claim that the squid is now government property. Naturally, Muriel protests.
This squid is the last of her kind, and she's a mother-to-be. If you're taking this squid, you'll have to go through me.
Arrest that woman for insubordination!
The government agents set up a lab right there on the spot, and they start conducting experiments on the space squid. Muriel talks to Courage, saying that she's worried about Mama Squid and that she thinks that she's withering away.
Courage, I'm worried about Mama Squid. Look at her. She's so sad. I think she's withering away. It's all up to you. You've got to get those eggs back under that squid, or else there'll never be any new stars in the sky. Go help her.
Courage ends up concocting a plan to get to the Mama Squid. He ends up burrowing underground and digging through to the chamber where the eggs are being held. He makes his way to the eggs just in time for a guard to catch him.
You don't have clearance!
Ooh, oochie, 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 coo.
Courage grabs all of the eggs and makes a quick escape. With the guards hot on his trail, he attempts to gain access to the squid by going through a vat of vital space squid fluid that they're pumping into the squid's chamber. We see the squid looking dry and quickly deteriorating. The scientists chase Courage around as he attempts to reunite the eggs with their mother.
Come on, hatch! Hatch!
With all the babies having hatched and escaped to the safety of space, Courage goes to greet Muriel.
Ah, Courage, you're part of the miracle of birth, you are. Courage, look! How lovely! She's becoming a garden, from making stars above to making flowers on the earth. Now that's the mystery of life, it is.
Just then, the commander of the Space Squid Department comes up saying that he was promoted to the secret Department of Military Cover-Ups. He makes Muriel and Courage agree not to tell anyone, and he sets them free as all of the government trucks pack up and roll out.
Good thing the money we gave that old farmer was made out of secret experimental rocket fuel. 3, 2, 1...
This episode, down to its core, is literally designed to tug directly at your heartstrings. Everything from the musical score, the storyline, and even the animations of the eyes and subtle tears from the squids. It all just combines so perfectly to tell a story that would bring even the strongest person to feel at least a little bit of sadness. There's just so much that I want to say, but I'm honestly struggling to find the words. There's a lot of really compelling things going on in this episode. We all know that there's a scientific explanation of where the stars come from and how they form, of course, but this episode takes all of that logic and throws it right out of the window, replacing it with a childlike story about squids that float elegantly through space, creating stars as they blissfully continue on their path. They push it further by implying that these two star makers that we're seeing are the very last of their kind and that they have a litter of star maker babies who are about ready to hatch. We're never really told what it is that led to the star makers being this close to extinction, but it's safe to say that the giant whale we saw in the beginning might have something to do with it. That entire beginning sequence just ripped my heart out and tore it into 1,000 pieces. We see the blissful star maker flying through space with his love until the massive space whale appears. The star maker holds off the beast long enough for his mate to escape with their children, and as the two shed tears through a painful goodbye, the Star Maker appears to emit an explosion of hundreds of stars, and it's implied that he gave his own life so that his mate could live on and continue their lineage as she makes haste towards the Earth to hatch their children. Just the context of this sequence at its core is sad in and of its own, but when we include the tears, the look in the Star Maker's eyes, and of course that painful musical score, it brings the sadness to a whole new level. This episode just hits different. It's one that, as years go by, I may forget what happened in this episode, I may forget the context, I may forget how it ends, but I'll never forget the feeling I get every time I see this episode. I remember seeing it one time when I was a kid, and that was straight up it. Anytime this episode would come on after that one time, I'd change the channel or just turn the TV off because I just couldn't handle the sadness. It was just a little too much for my young mind to handle. I didn't deal with sadness well when I was a kid, and this episode was literally like the key to the lock of overwhelming my sadness receptors in my brain. This episode also does a really good job of portraying the US government in a satirical manner. They roll up to the scene, claim the squid as their own property, and lock up anyone who dares disagree with what they're doing. Then, in the end, it all just turns into a giant military cover-up that the government wants everyone to just forget. My inner conspiracy theorist just wants to dive further into this, but for now, we're focusing on just the sadness of this episode, so we're not going to touch that topic. All in all, this is a special episode. It may not be burned deep into my brain like some of the other episodes are because I haven't seen it a million times, but the feelings that it gives me are definitely burned into my brain, and they come back just from thinking about this episode. It's weird to say this, but I haven't seen this episode in full since I was a little kid. Literally that one time I watched it all the way through. This is my second time seeing this episode from start to finish, and it brought back a whole slew of emotions that I've had buried deep inside of me since I was a kid. I don't know how I feel about this episode. I can say that it's a good episode overall and that there's some pretty deep meaning behind what's happening in the story. All in all, this one checks pretty much every box for what qualifies as a sad episode, and it did so in a very elegant manner that didn't feel forced in the slightest. Definitely a very good and very sad episode. Next up, we're going to dive into the Season 2 episode, The Magic Tree of Nowhere. The beginning of this episode sees a truck delivering a package to Muriel. She excitedly grabs it and runs inside to show Eustace the new kitchen curtains that she ordered, which he takes no interest in, of course. Muriel says that her package came with a little packet of seeds, and Eustace scoffs at the idea, saying that nothing has grown in their farm in 50 years.
What kind of dumb seeds are these anyway? These ain't growing seeds.
Courage picks up the seeds and he smells them. He decides to run over and dig a hole to plant them. Almost like fate, a massive rain cloud appears out of nowhere and pours directly on the spot where Courage is sitting. Muriel comes outside just dumbfounded by the massive tree, and she gives praise to Courage for growing it. Meanwhile, Eustace is looking out the window and just fuming because he couldn't even grow weeds if he tried, but Courage was able to grow this full-blown tree. Back inside, Muriel is checking on a pie that she has baking in the oven, but it's nearly burnt to a crisp.
Oh, Eustace, I wish I had a new oven.
Muriel peers outside to see a brand new oven sitting underneath the tree outside. Eustace carries the oven in, nearly killing himself in the process.
Thank you, Courage, for the new oven and that lovely tree.
Courage and Muriel proceed to have the time of their lives digging up the yard with their new toy, while burying Eustace in the process. Later that night, we see Muriel and Courage sitting by the tree and rocking in Muriel's rocking chair when Eustace comes up.
Eustace, where are you going?
I'm going to the picture show. I'm not wanted round here anyway.
I wish we could see a movie. Oh!
Muriel and Courage proceed to sit and enjoy their movie, but when Eustace catches sight of it, he gets incredibly mad and decides to drive full speed in his truck at the tree. At the last second, Muriel jumps in front of the tree to stop him. Muriel pleads with him, saying that they need this tree because it's providing for them. Eustace argues, saying that that's his job. We cut to later that night while everyone's asleep. Eustace gets up and goes out to the tree to bring in Muriel's rocking chair.
I don't know what Muriel sees in you. To me, you're just a stupid, rotten tree. And I wish she had a bigger head, then she'd know better. Muriel, what'd you do to yourself?
Courage, could you get me some water, dear?
Eustace calls the doctor, who says that this is the worst case of bully that he has ever seen, and that he's gonna do everything known to medical science to help.
Aha! Nothing to worry about. But there's nothing I can do.
While Courage is freaking out, Eustace says that this is all the fault of him and the tree, so he kicks Courage outside to the tree. We see Courage begging the tree for help.
Courage. Courage. Do not be afraid. I have the cure you seek. It will take 3 days, and in 3 days, I will be cut down.
Courage ends up spying on Eustace, and he sees him holding an axe, saying that he's going to chop the tree down. Courage does everything he can to stop Eustace, including building a sand castle and moat around the tree, complete with some terrifying eels.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling.
Some time passes, and we see Eustace dressed like a warrior and running towards the tree with an axe that looks nothing like the one he was sharpening earlier. Courage throws down some marbles on the ground in front of Eustace to make him slow down, and Eustace goes flying into the moat where we see the eels attack him. Multiple failed attempts later, we see Courage getting a phone call from the doctor saying that he has the cure. Courage rushes over to meet with the doctor, who passes him a vial saying that this will cure his broken leg. Back at the farm, we see Eustace going head to head with the tree.
What's it to you that cutting me down will bring? Will it make you feel more important?
Well, yes!
Fun fact, that scream right there is actually the second longest scream that Courage does throughout the entirety of this series. We see Courage go up to the freshly chopped down tree, crying his eyes out when this happens.
Courage, courage. I have the remedy you seek. Pick all the flowers from my branches and mix with pure hornet's honey. This is the cure.
Courage picks a few leaves from the tree and finds a massive hornet's nest to collect honey from, getting brutally attacked in the process, of course. Then, back at home, he feeds Muriel a spoonful of the concoction, which brings her right back to normal. We see the two of them outside, standing by the tree stump that has a small flower growing out of it now.
Oh, Muriel. Oh. Is the tree growing back yet?
This episode is one that's got a different air to the sadness. It doesn't necessarily tug at my heartstrings the same way that the last one did. This episode still hurts though. The tree was a massive blessing in all of their lives. A tree that can grant wishes is exactly what they need on that farm. Eustace said it himself in the beginning, nothing has grown on their farm in over 50 years. Eustace could have easily wished that their farm was a prosperous oasis of growth, or he could have just wished for like $1 million. We all know how greedy Eustace is. I'm surprised that he didn't think to just use the tree for his own personal gain. Instead though, he was just so focused on feeling that the tree was taking on his role as the provider for his family that he felt the need to literally just destroy it so no one could enjoy the tree. Seeing the tree get chopped down was definitely sad as all hell. However, the saddest part probably had to have been seeing Courage's reaction to the tree getting cut down. He literally hiked up to the top of a sketchy and rickety mountain or rock and just screamed to the heavens in sorrow over the loss of the tree. Seeing Courage come back to the tree with tears in his eyes was just incredibly heart-wrenching. This poor tree did nothing but grant wishes and try to make everyone happy. It was a selfless and beautiful piece of Mother Nature that was ripped away due to Eustace's unstable emotions. He literally went as far as almost running over his own wife just for the sake of destroying the tree. In the end though, the tree had the last laugh as Eustace was left with a giant head. As someone who values nature and the environment, it made me sad seeing the tree get cut down, and I have to point out how interesting the tree was. It had the ability to grant wishes, talk, and even seemed to be all-knowing, being able to predict the fact that it was going to be cut down in a few days. It even knew the exact remedy to cure Muriel's specific ailment. All in all, this episode was a really good one, though it was just really sad. Wrapping things up, we're going to check out the first segment from the final episode of the series, and this is definitely a contender for the all-time saddest episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog. We're checking out the Season 4 episode, Remembrance of Courage Past. This episode starts out with Muriel cooking up some dumplings at the stove while Courage sits nearby, gnawing on a chair in excitement and hunger. Courage eats his dumplings and downs a glass of milk, and then he sees the carton of milk with an ad for missing dogs on it. This seems to trigger a memory, and Courage goes into flashback mode. In his memory, we see Courage playing ball with his parents in the park. His parents get distracted, and as a result, Courage ends up getting pushed into a fence and getting his head stuck.
He's stuck! Henry, we have to get him to the vet.
After getting Courage free, the vet asks to speak to his parents in private as he sticks a lollipop in Courage's mouth and sends him to the waiting room. The flashback ends as Eustace barges his way into the kitchen, angry because he's hungry and because Courage is sitting at the table. Meanwhile, Courage just seems to be completely dissociating.
Human food's too good for you. Muriel, from now on it's dog food for the dog.
Oh my! Courage, you're still here.
Muriel is shocked that Courage hasn't moved from that same spot all night. Meanwhile, Eustace is just angry that Courage is still at the table. Muriel's concerned that Courage could be sick.
I've got just the cure. Booga booga booga!
I think it's time we took Courage to the vet.
Courage's memory continues where it left off the night before. In the memory, we see Courage chasing the vet, trying to find his parents. He opens multiple doors hoping to find them, but ends up finding mostly unspeakable horrors instead. Courage finally finds his parents and the vet, but just then the memory cuts back to present time, where we see Courage screaming and being taken into the vet by Muriel and Eustace. They go inside, and we find out that Courage is seeing the same exact vet that took his parents.
I know just what to do with the dog, but I'd like to have a moment with him alone.
Of course, Doctor. No need to be afraid, Courage. We'll be right outside.
Courage runs away from the veterinarian and flees through the vet clinic, with both Muriel and the vet in pursuit behind him. As Courage goes to open a door, the next part of the memory is unlocked. In the memory, we see little Courage opening a door and finding the veterinarian loading his parents into a rocket. As the vet sits down at his console and presses the buttons, Courage runs up to the rocket and attempts to save his parents. The memory then cuts back to current time, where we see this happen.
Ready for the trip? It's your turn now.
While Courage sits in the rocket, watching helplessly through the window, we cut back to his memory. In the memory, Courage is being chased around the rocket by the veterinarian, and he successfully eludes him when he ends up jumping through a garbage chute that's on the rocket's launch pad. Back in current time, the veterinarian ends up throwing Muriel and Eustace into the rocket to send them into space too, but as he shuts the door, Courage escapes and tries to outrun the vet. He ends up throwing a bunch of screws and other hardware on the ground, which the vet slips on. While he's on the ground, Courage goes to free Eustace and Muriel.
It's time for your trip, little dog.
With Eustace and Muriel free, Courage ends up hitting the veterinarian in the head with the heavy door of the rocket and shoving him into it as we see him get launched into space.
Courage, I knew you could do it. Oh, my poor thing. Out here all alone? What courage you have. Would you like to come home with me? I'll call you Courage. We'll have a grand time.
The episode ends with all three of them sitting on the porch together while Muriel wonders what happened to the veterinarian. We cut to another planet where we see the vet getting out of the rocket only to be attacked by all the dogs that he sent into space, including Courage's parents. The karma that takes place at the end of this episode is well deserved, but alas, it doesn't undo all the damage that was done by the evil veterinarian. This episode is one that really just hits you right in the feels, and it explains pretty much Courage's entire origin story. The trauma that Courage went through when he was a pup definitely had a lasting effect that followed Courage to this very day. The horror that he faced is for sure one that could never be forgotten. Imagine being a small kid and living your life happily with your parents until one day they're just ripped away from you. Literally, Courage's day went from amazing as he played ball with his parents who were so proud of him for being able to catch the ball, to just straight up horror and terror as he literally watched his parents get launched into space by a straight up psychopath. Seeing this origin story really does explain an awful lot about why Courage is the way he is, and why he acts the way that he does in the face of danger, or anything scary for that matter. I really appreciated the way that they approached the entire premise of this episode. This is a really good representation of how hard PTSD can hit a person seemingly out of nowhere. All it took was seeing a carton of milk with missing dogs listed on it to send Courage straight back into the trauma that he had faced all of those years ago. Throughout the course of this episode, we would see Courage relive this trauma not only in his mind as the memory played back, but also in real life yet again as he gets taken to the same exact veterinarian that kidnapped his parents. There's a lot of different emotions we see Courage go through in this episode. There's the sadness that we see him go through when his parents are initially taken. There's straight up fear and hysterics we see him go through as Eustace and Muriel drag him into the vet. And of course, there's the complete lack of emotion and disconnect that we see Courage go through when he's dissociating as he initially recalls the trauma that he went through. It's generally implied that this is a repressed memory that Courage is reliving for the first time, and seeing him go through all this again is just incredibly heartbreaking. I will say though that I really like how they saved this for the last episode in the series. It feels good to have everything kind of come full circle and for us to learn Courage's origin story in the last episode of the series. This whole situation portrayed in this episode is really just heavy on the emotions, and it definitely made me equal parts happy and sad when we see the end of the memory when Muriel approaches to save Courage and bring him to a new home. One thing that's totally random though that I just can't not bring up is how did the doctor afford all of those rockets? Like, when the veterinarian gets launched into space and we see him land on that planet, the rocket is completely destroyed, which implies that the rocket gets destroyed every time it lands on that planet, right? Well, there's quite a bit of dogs on that planet, and the rocket's not just gonna fly itself back to Earth. That means that the veterinarian probably replaces that rocket every time he sends a new dog into space, which I'd imagine is obnoxiously expensive. Where is he getting all this funding? Maybe it has something to do with the secret Department of Military cover-ups? Who knows, but I do know that this was overall a fantastic episode that really just hit right, though it was extremely sad. But what do you think? Can you think of another episode that's just as sad, or maybe sadder than the ones that we looked at today? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like and give praise to the YouTube algorithm in hopes that it pushes this video to everyone else. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Stupid dog!